6 tuna brands sold at every Walmart right now you should never buy. I picked up 6 cans of tuna off a Walmart shelf last week, and I want to tell you what I found before you buy can number 7. The smallest can in this lineup weighs 5 ounces total, printed right on the front. What that label does not tell you anywhere on the can, how many of those 5 ounces are actual tuna, and how many are the liquids sitting around it. One of these brands costs nearly 3 times the others, and I'll tell you at the end whether that price is honest. But by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 3 cans earn a place in your pantry and which 3 are mostly water with a fish rumour. Before I get into it, which brand is sitting in your cabinet right now? Tell me in the comments. I want to know if it's one of the ones I'm about to praise, or one of the ones I'm about to take apart. Canned tuna looks like the simplest food on the shelf. Fish, water or oil, salt. Most people grab whatever's cheapest or whatever they grew up with and never turn the can over. But the ratio of actual tuna meat to broth and filler is not the same can to can. And that ratio is exactly what you're paying for. I haven't bought a can of Chunk Light since I left, and I don't plan to, because once you start comparing broth-heavy cans to solid pack ones, you see where your money is actually going. I read every word on the label. Here is my honest verdict, brand by brand. Let's start with StarKist Chunk Light in water. The ingredient list is short: tuna, water, vegetable broth, salt. That sounds clean until you drain the can and look at what's left in the bowl. This is what the ingredient list shows. Vegetable broth sitting second, right after tuna, which tells you the can was never packed with tuna alone. The plain language conclusion is simple. Some portion of what you paid for by weight is broth, not fish. My verdict on StarKist Chunk Light. It is a fine, everyday can, but it is not a solid fish can, and you should buy it knowing that. When I lived in Holmes County, we didn't have canned tuna often, but when we did, it was whatever was cheapest at the bulk store, and nobody in that kitchen ever once turned the can over to read what was inside. You trusted the picture of the fish on the front, and that was the end of it. I think about that a lot now, because the picture on the front of a StarKist can has not changed much over the years. But I have no way of knowing whether the inside of that can has changed. And neither do you, unless you read it yourself. Every single time, not just once. There's also a texture question worth naming here. Chunk Light tuna comes from smaller cuts and loose flakes, which means more surface area touching that broth, which means more broth clings to every piece you scoop out. That is not a flaw hidden from you. It is right there in how the fish is cut before it ever goes in the can. Most people simply never connect the cut of the fish to the amount of liquid they're paying for. And that connection is the whole point of tonight's video. Bumble Bee Chunk Light follows the same pattern: water, vegetable broth, salt, tuna. I bought this exact brand for years before I understood what that number meant. Before I left the order, none of us read labels the way I do now. We just bought what was on the shelf and trusted the picture on the front. Read that again. Vegetable broth, not water alone. That broth has to come from somewhere, and it comes out of the same can your tuna is in. My verdict on Bumble Bee Chunk Light: drain it well and don't expect a heavy can. I want to slow down on that broth question for a moment because it confuses people. Vegetable broth in a tuna can is not a hidden poison, and it is not a trick. It is a cooking liquid, added during processing, and it is allowed to be listed as part of the can's contents under standard labelling rules. The plain language conclusion is not that Bumble Bee did anything wrong. The conclusion is simply that broth takes up space and weight in a can that has a fixed total weight printed right on the label. And every gram of broth is a gram that is not fish. That's arithmetic, not an accusation. Chicken of the sea chunk light in water carries the same 3 ingredients in the same order. This is not an accusation against any one company. All 3 of the biggest chunk light brands are built the same way, because chunk light tuna itself is a smaller, broth-friendly cut of fish. The conclusion follows plainly. If you want more actual tuna and less broth, chunk light in general is the wrong category, no matter whose name is on the can. My verdict on chicken of the sea chunk light. It is honestly labelled for what it is, but what it is mostly small pieces swimming in liquid. I want to pause here and make something clear, because I know how this can sound if you're only half listening. None of these 3 companies is hiding anything from you. The ingredient list is sitting right there on every can, printed in the order required, available to anyone willing to turn the can over before it goes in the cart. The problem has never been concealment. The problem is that almost nobody reads it, and a label you don't read might as well say nothing at all. Now I want to talk about Walmart's own Great Value Chunk Light, because people assume store brand means lower quality automatically, and that is not always fair. The label reads the same as the name brands: tuna, water, vegetable broth, salt. That is the whole label. The conclusion is plain. You are paying less for the same basic composition as the name brands sitting right next to it on the shelf. My verdict on Great Value Chunk Light. It is not a downgrade. It is the same broth to fish category at a lower price, and there is nothing dishonest in that. This is actually one of the more interesting verdicts in this whole video, because it cuts against what most people assume walking into the store. We are trained to think the cheaper can must be cutting corners somewhere we can't see. But the ingredient list does not support that assumption here. Same 3 or 4 ingredients, same order, same category of fish. If anything, this is a case where reading the label should make you more comfortable buying the cheaper can, not less. Here's where it gets harder to defend. Some chunk light cans list water first, ahead of the tuna itself, depending on the specific product line. Read that again. When water is listed before the fish is not the majority ingredient by weight. That is not a small fish brand. That is what was left when more fish would have cost the company more. My verdict on the cheapest chunk light private label cans. Check that ingredient order yourself before you buy, because the order on the label tells you what's actually most of the can. And one more from the avoid list. Flavoured chunk light varieties. The ones with added oils, seasonings, or tuna salad-style mixes sold in the same aisle. These add mayonnaise-style oils, sugar and starches on top of the broth question we already covered. The fact is plain. Every added ingredient beyond tuna, water and salt is something other than fish that you're paying tuna prices for. My verdict on flavoured chunk light mixes. They are a snack product wearing a tuna label, and you should know that going in. I'll go a step further on this one, because it's the segment people email me about the most. A ready-to-eat tuna salad pouch is not trying to be the same product as a plain can of tuna. And judging it against a plain can isn't entirely fair either. The fairer comparison is convenience against cost. You are paying for someone else to mix the mayonnaise and the seasoning for you in a small pouch, at a price per ounce that is usually far higher than buying plain tuna and a jar of mayonnaise separately. That's not a hidden trick. That's just what convenience always costs, in every aisle of the store, not only this one. Here is the larger principle underneath all 6 of these verdicts. The front of a can is marketing, but the ingredient list is the only part of the package that has to tell you the truth in order. I don't judge a brand by its logo or its price point. I judge it by what's actually printed on the back, in order, in plain words. That's the whole method. And it works on every shelf, not just the tuna aisle. I'll say one more thing before we move to the close, because it matters more than any single brand verdict in this video. None of what I've told you today should make you afraid of canned tuna as a category. Fish, water, salt, even with broth added, is still a simple, recognizable food, nothing close to the long, unreadable lists you'll find in other parts of the same store. The point was never to scare you away from the tuna aisle. The point was to teach you to read it the way I read every label now. Slowly, in order, without trusting the picture on the front to tell you the truth for you. If you've made it this far, I want you to do something for me before the next part. I'm not asking you to subscribe because you liked a video. I'm asking you to subscribe if you're the kind of person who turns the can over before you put it in the cart. That's who this channel is for. People who want to know what's actually inside, not just what's promised on the front. Now, a few honest limits before I go further. Availability is not the same everywhere. What's stocked at your Walmart may not match another store across town, and ingredient lists do change over time as suppliers shift. So check your own can, even if it's a brand I mention here today. I am telling you what I read on specific cans I held in my own hands, not making a permanent claim about every can that will ever carry that label. A company can keep the same name on the front for years while quietly changing a supplier or a recipe, and the only way you'd ever know is by reading the back again, not assuming it still says what it said the last time you bought it. Now let's talk about the 3 I'd actually put in my own cart. Wild Planet Solid White Albacore is the first. The label reads, tuna and salt, nothing else. That is the whole label. The conclusion is straightforward. When the ingredient list is 2 words long, there is very little room for broth or filler to hide. My verdict on Wild Planet. It earns its higher price because the label backs it up, not because the packaging looks expensive. I want to be honest about the price difference too, because fairness goes both directions in this verdict. A 2-word ingredient list does not automatically mean a brand deserves your money. Plenty of products keep a short label and still charge more than the difference justifies. But in this case, the price gap between Wild Planet and the Chunk Light brands lines up with what you're actually getting. A larger cut of fish with almost nothing added. That alignment between price and content is rarer than it should be, and it's worth paying attention to when you find it. Safe Catch Solid Yellowfin or Albacore is the second recommendation. Same pattern. Tuna, salt, sometimes nothing more than that. Now, I want to be fair about something. Safe Catch also publishes mercury testing information on individual catches, which is more transparency than most brands offer, even though I have not personally verified those test results myself, so I won't make a health claim from it. My verdict on Safe Catch. A brand that gives you more information than it has to, on top of a short, honest ingredient list. The third recommendation is simpler than a brand name. Solid White Albacore packed in olive oil, whichever maker offers it at your store, water-packed or oil-packed, as long as the label still reads tuna, oil, salt, and nothing more. The fact is plain. Solid white is a larger cut of fish that holds together as a piece, which leaves less room in the can for broth to fill. My verdict on solid white as a category: it is consistently the more honest choice across nearly every brand that offers it, store name or national name. Before you go, here's your homework. Walk to your own kitchen, pick up whichever tuna can is sitting in your cabinet right now, and read the ingredient list out loud to yourself. Then come back here and tell me in the comments what it actually says, not what you assumed it said, what it says. So let's close the loop. That broth versus fish ratio I mentioned at the start. Now you know exactly why it matters, and you know which 3 cans on this list keep the broth out of the equation in the first place. And the 3 recommended brands I promised you at the beginning, Wild Planet, Safe Catch, and plain solid white albacore. There they are, named and explained. No surprise left hanging. I haven't bought a can of Chunk Light since I left, and after today, neither should you. Not without turning it over first.